Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of Straight Talk Whiskey. I'm Nick, with you as always, and thanks for joining us for another segment on our whiskey review series. This week, we have a special conclusion to a little mini-series that we've held once or twice over the past couple months, literally since past the summer really, but had a question recently about when we were going to see a final product from the whiskey that has been aging alongside us in many of our whiskey reviews for some time now. So, we do have that bottle for you now. It is ready to go. So while you may not be able to try some at home because I'm not a distillery that is putting this out to the stores, at least we'll get sort of a conclusion to the home-aged whiskey process. Now, just as a brief recap, back in July of 2015, I started with this little barrel that already came charred on the inside, which is good because the charcoal interaction with the spirit helps to purify it, also creates a better interaction between the wood barrel and the spirit that goes in it. So I filled that initially with Guinness and took, I forget how many of these, it took probably between 6 and 12. Can't remember, it was a long time ago. But anyway, I just wanted to give sort of a seasoning to the barrel, just try to experiment, see what happens. And I really sort of like the darker, rich, dark fruitier tones that Guinness has, these sort of malted chocolate notes to it, which are definitely something that I would like to see through the final product. And really, why I picked the Bunratty Potcheen is because it was the only sort of Irish Potcheen that I could find at the time. Now, of course, there's a lot of other ones out there. Glendalough has one. Teeling has another one that I haven't been able to get my hands on. I'm hoping to get that relatively soon. So this is what I had at the time, and it wasn't a bad choice. It's 45% ABV, so a little bit higher than standard. I would have liked to have something that, was right off the stills, but, something that's like 55% ABV or something like that. So I can really sort of get at the true character of the spirit and see what I could do with the aging of the whiskey. And really where I wanted to go with this was sort of leaning more towards Irish whiskey flavors, things that you would find in some of your favorite Irish whiskeys. And so that's why I chose the Potcheen and the seasoning in Guinness, because I really had sort of a clear direction. But if you go back and look at the first couple of videos on aging your own whiskey at home, you'll see other tips I've had about different things that you could season with, and that sort of thing. All about the aging and all of that good info. So in September, a couple months after, now we have to remember this is sort of the dead of summer in upstate New York, and the temperatures last summer did get pretty high, and so I filled this with two bottles, actually, two 750 milliliter bottles of the Bunratty Potcheen. And basically what I ended up with after bottling this was approximately a 750 milliliter fill. So I sort of went ahead and put my own little label on it, and named it after sort of my grandfather, called it Pop's Dram, because he was always proud of his Irish heritage and shared that with us as grandchildren, which was, always great, and it's always fun to look back on those memories. So, just a sort of a tribute to him. And it has an age statement on it, believe it or not. So, 45% ABV, 90 proof, aged in a Guinness seasoned barrel for 5 months. Now, obviously, 5 months isn't enough to call it an Irish whiskey, and also, because it wasn't aged in Ireland, may have been distilled there, can't say that it is an Irish whiskey. So, it's a whiskey nonetheless, and after sort of going through my tastings, I did a tasting at roughly 4 months and got some interesting things. I'll just go through it quick. The color, honey, the nose, juniper, rose water, cucumber, malt. Definitely interesting. That's totally being spirit driven at that point. Maybe sort of the maltiness I was getting from the Guinness, but not an overly rich sense of either the Guinness or the oak barrel at that point in time when I tasted it. Makes me think that the Bunratty Pachín wasn't distilled with malted barley, that maybe they used some other things, as may have been common back then in the 17th century and before and even closely thereafter, of using different sort of things to distill with potatoes possibly. Not really sure exactly because it's hard to find information on this other than that people will go and review it and give it very, very poor reviews, which I happen to disagree with, which I've mentioned in other reviews. But that's why it's, straight talk whiskey here. We say it like we feel, and then I'm not just going to blast it because it tastes different than other Irish whiskeys that are out there that people have tasted. So, anyway, moving on to the taste. When I tasted this at roughly, the tail end of 3 months going on 4 months, had some cucumber, bubblegum, which is really interesting, and then starting to get into some of the more of the wood, the vanilla, the oak flavors in there, imparting from the barrel itself and possibly from the Guinness as well. That was doing a little bit of a balancing act. But really, it was the spirit, an unaged spirit, that was, driving the ship at that point in time. Sweet candy was the other note that I had, and definitely an overpowering sense, and it sort of carried through to the finish, was sort of this bitter grape, if you can imagine that. So sort of the sweetness that's in the grape, sort of that same type of taste, but on a really bitter side in terms of the finish. So that was that. Bottled it in February. There's a video floating around there on our Facebook page of that whole bottling process. It's not really that intense, but, just for provenance sake. So, let's go in and see what we got. So, we're sporting our nice little whiskey cask Glencairn glass, which is nice. Now, rolling around, see the color. We've got definitely more of a richer, orangey sort of copper note in there, going on a little bit darker from the honey note that I noted at 3.5, 4 months. The age, 3 months, it was definitely picking up a little bit of the color and that sort of thing. But being a 5-month total, it's in a smaller barrel, so you can age things a little bit less and see a more rapid development of aging process onto a whiskey. But there's nothing like time for a whiskey and a good, really good seasoned barrel, or unseasoned. But at the very least, it should be toasted, or charred. So let's go in for the nose. Still very sort of spirit-driven at this point, which you get some of more this chemically aldehyde sort of in there. Definitely the rose water is still lingering in there. Slightly an over-oaked note to this, and there's definitely, in these extreme hot summer months, there was a lot of interaction between cask and spirit going on. The Angels took literally half of the aged spirit that was in this tiny little barrel. So, there's a lot to be said to that. So, a lot of that interaction in and out of the wood. And so, July, we had a pretty warm September and October, but, it did cool down in the November, December months. And certainly January was colder here. So it definitely did get a big sort of fluctuation in temperature, which I think is really showing through on the nose here. Slight bit of honey. Now this is a whiskey that I would pour, and if I was going to be enjoying it or having a couple people enjoy it for the night, I would definitely want to let it sit out for a while. Maybe start with something else that was a little bit more palatable. I would probably start with a Bushmills standard bottling or the Tullamore any of those, I would really start out if I were going to do a tasting of this, because this is really meant to be poured out into a glass and let it sit for a little while. Now, I can't measure the ABV in this, in terms of what it actually is, but we know that the spirit itself was 45% ABV, so that's it's a little bit higher than normal, but nothing too earth-shattering there. Definitely the sense of a dulled down grape note to it. It's almost like a grape drink mix, the powder that you would stir in for one of those drinks. It's definitely got a lot of that going on. So let's go in for the taste. It's definitely got a nice fruity character to it. It's got a real punch to it that a lot of whiskeys, even at 45% ABV, don't have. There's a real heart to it that is that bitter grape, but also a little bit oak. Definitely a lot of wood tannins in there, are sort of punching through, but then it's sort of a explosion to the side of, you get these nice rich vanillas, and a little bit of honey, a little bit of caramel too in there. But the finish is pretty quick on this, I will say. In terms of the Guinness imparting flavor to this, seasoning the cask, you definitely get a lot of the rich fruits and that sort of thing that are, traditional in the Guinness draft, which is really interesting because I think it balances a lot of the more bitter down grapes and that sort of thing. This sort of aldehyde, sort of medicinal, but not in the way that you would think of like a peated scotch or something like that, but something very like Band-Aid-esque, which is I know it's kind of weird to say, but it's definitely got that sense to it. So let's take one last pass at it. Now the texture on this, even though it's short lasting, it doesn't linger around for a long time, it's got a really chalky sort of sense. Again, just like a frickin' grape does. If you've ever, like as a kid, and this is probably kind of weird, but like if you played sort of with the peel of, the outside skin of the grape and you sort of peeled that away, and if you were to feel that texture of the grape underneath the skin, it sort of got the same sort of texture on the mouthfeel of this whiskey, which is, it's definitely different. It's not bad, it's just different. It's not what you would expect. And if you watch some people's review on the Bunratty Pot Cream, you'll see them, they twist their face up like, oh my god, I don't understand what is going on. Like, I'm incapable of, drinking this. This is so terrible. And the reviews out there are, dismal. The one I saw the other day was 30 or something like that. And sort of what you got to remember is it's not, it's not your mother's Irish whiskey. You know what I mean? It's not made with the traditional, barley, unmalted barley, corn, things like that. There's a real indication that there's something else in here that is not traditional to the whiskey making process of today's whiskeys. And it doesn't make it bad. It just makes it different. And anything, you would think it would be sort of a benefit to the whiskey drinker in the sense that you now have another sort of shelf on your entire, bookcase of tastes and aromas and that sort of thing, sort of in the back of your memory bank that you can, reflect on if you were to taste something again. Or if you had a different type of spirit, a vodka or grappa or gin even, something like that. Once you taste all these different things, you begin to opening yourself up to be more discernible about flavors and that sort of thing. And I think that's what's interesting about aging your own whiskey at home, because we really need to sort of, bring it back to the aging your whiskey, because that's what this episode and little mini-series that we've done is about. So once you figure out sort of the things that you like in a whiskey, the main things that really stand out to you, if you like really sherried Scotch single malts, then maybe you want to look at finishing a little barrel or cask in sherry or port or Madeira, something like that, which could be interesting. Or maybe you'll do what I did and not really know what the hell was going to happen, and just say, going to add some Guinness to it. We're going to try this Pachin that was just sitting there on the shelf. It was clear. It didn't, it wasn't aged, obviously, and it says, that it's distilled in Ireland, and that's really all I had to go on, other than the barrel that I had already purchased. So just sort of be creative, be open-minded, and that's going to make you a better whiskey drinker, a better enthusiast, and it will sort of dull down the tendencies for people to get into the snobbery, which is pretty prevalent, I would say, in this whole industry. You see a lot of people that you feel like you couldn't even go up to and talk to. There's a lot of people that I have come across over the past couple of years that, even though they seem very knowledgeable, they don't seem approachable. And if anything, you should be able to go up with whatever bottle you have, and if you go to a club or a tasting or something like that, be able to share with people, share your experiences, see what other people have to say, learn from it, teach other people. Even if you know the slightest bit of knowledge, your still experience is going to contribute to everybody else's, because it's your own personal view. And, that's something important to stick to, because that's what's going to keep this industry alive. So, we'll go one last taste here, then we'll hit the road. Still sort of that bubblegum flavor, while very weird, is still prevalent in this. This is a very spirit-driven whiskey. And you'll notice that it's not always the cask that is driving it. It's not always that, this is a very old, sherry cask or something like that, and you can taste sort of the rich, sherried, fruity flavors in it, or something like that. This is very spirit-driven, and that's, it's a learning experience. I'll definitely change some things if I try it again, and, that's what you have. So, for this episode, that's it, and we'll see you next time, and it'll be something interesting as always. And like I always say, if there's something that you're looking to see me review or anything like that, just give a shout. I'll put it on the list. I'll try to get to it as soon as possible. I don't have $400 million to find everything that's on the list right away, but we'll get to it in time, hopefully. And so with that, to you and yours. We'll see you next time.